Hello, and thank you for watching this weekly Ag Weather Update, brought to you by AgCarolina Farm Credit. Well, to get us started, here's what we're going to be discussing. We have a couple of very interesting systems going across the country that will be bringing some precipitation to the Carolinas at the end of this week. And it turns out the first system is actually going to start way up here in the U.S.-Canadian border here the next couple of days. And as it progresses on up to the east, it will drag a front right in through this area. And that will be the front on which the next system, this AgCarolina low, forms and eventually moves on up to the north and east. Now, before that gets here, things will be relatively dry here across the southeast, which is what we need after the very wet weekend. So we certainly have a dry start to the week and a wet finish. But after we kind of get through diagnosing what the current pattern is doing and what it means in terms of weather here in the Carolinas, we're going to spend a little bit of time at the end talking about the evolution of this weak El Nino event that's going to be happening right here and what this is going to mean for our winter forecast. So this will be a quick recap on some stuff we've already discussed. So let's dig right on into this. First thing I want to show you is this. I've got two graphs here. On the left, this is basically the temperature record for 2018 for Raleigh. When you look at this, what we see here is that the start of October was very warm compared to normal. But as we discussed, there was going to be a bit of a pattern shift. We're going to get rid of that big southeastern ridge and start to allow some troughs to move in. You can see that we've really broken down here and gotten to be at times much below normal in terms of temperatures. Well, the question is, how will this continue to evolve as we move on into fall, the rest of fall and into winter? We're going to talk about that in a few moments. Certain things have been quite wet. We, of course, have about the 10 or 11 inches of rain that came from Hurricane Florence, and then Matthew just a couple of weeks later right in through there, which is why we currently at this point are well above average on precipitation. But we've been above average in terms of precipitation going all the way back here to the end of April. So it's been a very, very wet year. And I just want to kind of show you this all in perspective here. Okay, over the last 3 days, remember we did have two clipper systems that kind of raced through the Corn Belt, and there was that large low pressure system, the big kind of first nor'easter of the year. We can see the lot of North and South Carolina here got another inch and a half precipitation, some locations even more than that. So it was a very wet weekend, or end of the week and weekend, but we are pushing in some drier air here. And let's kind of talk about where that drier air is going to be coming from. Okay, it's always about the pattern. It's what's going on in the upper levels of the atmosphere. And here's the story. To start things off, here's the upper level trough associated with that weakened system that's going to be moving on off to the north and east. And watch what builds in behind it right there. So I just took you basically all the way from Monday into Wednesday, middle of the afternoon. Now at this particular point, we got a major trough that's running down the middle part of the country. And that first low pressure system is going to be moving here up toward the Great Lakes and eventually dragging its cold front right in through that area. But before that gets here, look at this. Pleasant weather, warmer weather, drier weather associated with that ridge here along the East Coast. So it looks as though we're going to be able to enjoy a pretty decent Halloween here simply due to the presence of that ridge. But let me teach you something simple about troughs and ridges aside from their temperature patterns, okay? You see, wherever you find your trough in your subsequent ridge, so the ridge is kind of sitting somewhere over here like this, it's the transition zone in between them where you go from the trough to the ridge where things are very active. And that will be where what we call our AgCarolina low is going to start and race up toward the northeast as we progress through the end of this week. So I'm talking about the end of this upcoming week. So watch this trough finally dig through. There it goes. With it, we'll not only bring unsettled weather, but we'll also be bringing some cooler weather back into this area. Now, I've got you all the way till next Sunday at this point. And what we see overall is the flow of the atmosphere wants to bring in this kind of weaker ridge out west like this, a trough in the middle part of the country, and another ridge out east. So we will be seeing some rebounding temperatures after this system goes through, but there is certainly a reinforcing trough that's going to try to move through the middle part of the country. Now, when we think about bigger picture, remember there's a lot of cold air still stored right up here in Canada. We've been building that cold air reservoir up for about 45 to 60 days. So as I continue to animate this forward, what we see is with time, the European model as we get here into, the first full week of the month of November wants to keep bringing in this broader trough feature over to the eastern half of the country and allow ridging out west. Now what that generally means is on average warmer conditions out west with cooler than average weather here over the east. But I want you to know something about our model behavior right now. Remember, we rely pretty heavily on these models to our forecasting. We see that once we get beyond about day 10 in the forecast, do you see how things really kind of smooth out there? We don't really see a highly amplified pattern one way or another. We certainly do still see the models want to keep a ridge out west and a trough over the east. But the reason why everything is so smoothed out is because there's a lot of divergence in the different model runs here, which means predictability beyond about day 8, 9, or 10 is pretty low at this point. So I just want you all to know that. But overall, we're still trying to keep this pattern where the remainder of the month of October and most of November could possibly see cooler risks at times in the area that I'm kind of shading right over here. Okay, so let's take this and move on to a temperature forecast. This is a 5-day sliding window. So when we look at this, this is going to tell us the temperature anomalies through the next 5 days getting us through Friday. And you can see that because of where that ridge builds in, we got a big section of the country down here in the southeast, kind of stretching there from parts of Texas all the way up to almost New York. We are going to be seeing near average to warmer than average temperatures. But as I click play here, what you will see is that bigger trough kind of digging in at times. And once it kind of gets established there, we do overall see the cooler risks as we move throughout the next 10 to 15 days. Now, what does this mean? This is just a reflection of the upper level pattern. We'll probably see better chances for warmer weather out west for most of that time, with the chances for cooler weather here across the eastern third of the country. Doesn't mean every day is going to be cool, but I'm just trying to diagnose the pattern here, not really kind of give you individual daily forecasts, okay? So let's take that and now break it down in terms of precipitation pattern here. If we animate this out, we're looking at the European models forecast getting you through the middle part of this week. And what do we see? We'll look up there on the US-Canadian borders. I rock back and forth. Monday, Tuesday into Wednesday, that's where our first low pressure system goes. And we can see that higher atmospheric pressure dominates the Carolina coast. And so therefore the flow around this is just like this. And we're going to be feeding quite a bit of moisture into that cold front that's kind of sweeping there across the middle part of the country. But with that higher air pressure, things are going to be relatively dry, and I think we're going to have a really nice Halloween. In fact, let's just get you about the time trick-or-treating starts. So this is around 7 p.m. on Halloween. We can still see their higher atmospheric pressure helping keep things relatively dry. Now, as we kind of press forward, watch what this system does. We're going to pay close attention right here in the Arkansas, Louisiana, Texas region for our next low to form and right up that front toward the northeast. And as it does so, look at this, that front gets pulled through the Carolinas Thursday into Friday, and that will really be our next chance at precipitation. So overall, a relatively dry week until we get toward the end of the week. And it's going to take a little bit of time for that front to get out of there as that low slides right up. There it goes again, Friday into early Saturday morning. Now behind this, things stay relatively active, and you know why. It's because that trough ridge pattern really just keeps moving through the flow. We have another system that gets going here on Sunday, and as you can see here now, remember, we're out here pretty far. This is day 8, day 9, day 10. We can just see where we keep bringing through these bigger low pressure systems, and they drag our front right there through the Carolinas. So again, I don't have much confidence in the exact position of this low as I keep going back and forth here, but it just kind of shows me that we're looking at about one system a week right now as we progress through the next 2 weeks. So putting that all together, a lot of the precipitation that you see right here is from that second low pressure system that runs right up the East Coast. But overall, for the Carolinas, a relatively drier week until we get toward the end of the week when that front finally slides through and brings in our chance of precipitation here. Okay, with that, I want to finish this video by talking about this El Nino we're watching. Now remember, El Nino events typically happen right in through here. We're going to be watching for a weak El Nino event to emerge right in that inner circle I just drew there, while keeping cooler water down here off the west coast of South America. Now, with that particular feature, we call this a Mordecai El Nino. We've talked about it a lot, where we just have the warm water tucked in here, and it doesn't extend pretty far into the South Pacific. That tends to give us cooler risks here along the East Coast. I want to add to this a little bit before I show you what the current El Nino is doing. And that is, I want you to see the warmer waters that we've got tucked away up here in the Gulf of Alaska and also in the Bering Sea there where Alaska meets Russia. You see, this is often referred to as the warm blob, okay? But really why we want to pay attention to this is that generally warmer water there tends to push a ridge up here into the Gulf of Alaska. And just given the wavelength of our trough ridge system, that tends to put a trough over the east. So when we keep seeing our forecast models suggesting that there are cooler risks for the East Coast this winter, I'm just telling you, there's a couple of good reasons for that. One is the El Nino event that's developing, and two is the presence of that warmer water there in the Gulf of Alaska. Well, what's our El Nino doing right now? Well, what you're looking at here is an animation where we're looking down in the ocean. So this is going down in the ocean, and this stretches from South America over here over to Australia, which is over there. And this feature you see right in through here, this is kind of the warm blob of water that is slowly pushing its way up toward the surface that will become, here's the surface, I just kind of circled it, that will become our El Nino event that we're going to be watching throughout much of this winter. So it is still on its way. And remember, that weak El Nino may favor a cooler, more active, more stormy pattern here for the East Coast. So we're just kind of putting this picture together as we transition seasons here. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this forecast video. We at AgCarolina hope you look forward to our next video coming out next week. Until then, keep a close eye on the radar toward the end of the week as we're watching that big front slide through the Carolinas, giving us our next chance of precipitation. I look forward to talking to you again next week.